Hi, my name is Helga Waage, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the startup community in Iceland, and maybe a little bit about how it has developed for the past 15 to 20 years. This is a topic that I care deeply about. I think it's really, really important for us to move our society towards being a knowledge-based society rather than being a society that focuses on selling energy to aluminum smelters or as food to people abroad. So how does this work? Okay. I have a master's degree in computer science in artificial intelligence from the University of Pittsburgh. I have been working in the startup scene for about 20 years. They weren't really called startups back then. They were just small companies with crazy ideas. The past 10 years I've been working for my own startups, probably because nobody wants to hire me. I have always been very interested in innovation and how technology and innovation affect society. So startup communities are a natural thing for me to migrate towards. And these interests have kind of led me to do all kinds of weird things. I've been evaluating grants for the Icelandic community, for the European community, on and off for the past 15 years. I am the co-founder of Icelandic Institute for Intelligent Machines, which is a non-profit research institute housed at the University of Reykjavik. And I'm the co-founder of the Icelandic chapter of Girl Geeks Dinner and Korka. Both of those networks are support networks for women in technology and innovation. Last year I was the mentor of Startup Iceland. Startup Reykjavik. We always confuse those two. Which is an incubator program based on the Techstar formula. And those wonderful people selected me as mentor of the year, for which I'm very grateful, and I don't think I've ever thanked you because they gave me the award while I was somewhere else. So that's a little bit about myself. As you can see, I'm really unhappy when I don't get what I want. So I work for a company called Mobilities, which is a company I founded along with Tóti, who's sitting over there. We develop and operate a mobile-first e-commerce and marketing platform focused on the entertainment industry. As Magnus said earlier, we run the mobile websites for Ticketmaster and Live Nation, and we are currently operating the third largest mobile e-commerce site in the world. So in order to be closer to our customers and expand our network a little bit, we decided to set up an office in the US. So after some considerations, we ended up setting up an office in Portland, Oregon. We thought about Boulder, Colorado, but Americans never understand me when I say that name, so Portland it is. We, in order to get introduced into the network there, we got into the Portland Seed Fund program, which is an incubator in Portland. So during a 6-month period, last year I managed to be both a mentor and a participant in 2 different incubator programs in 2 different continents during a 6-month period. So yeah, I do startups. To frame my talk, because now I have a lot of opinions about the startup community, and to frame the talk, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to say this word a number of times today, Boulder. You probably all, most of you read the Startup Community book by Brad Feld. And just to focus, the 4 key ingredients are you have to have a startup community that are led by entrepreneurs. You have to have a long-term commitment of those leaders. You have to have an inclusive environment, and you have to have continual activities. All those ingredients are necessary to have a startup community. I agree with that, and I think I'll explain a little bit how I have seen this to be true and where we can see it breaking down. So let's start by visiting Reykjavik in the mid-90s. So this was a period of post-Cold War. This was the coming of age of probably the first generation that grew up with computers. Kids that got a PC when they were in their home while they were still young and got to play with them during the grow up. This was also a time of where a lot of people had just recently graduated from what was the most popular major here in the late 1980s, which was computer science. We had also just gotten into the European Economic Area, which resulted in what was called the 4 freedoms: free movements of goods, services, people, and capital. It was during those times when we saw the first startups in Iceland. Companies that were just not small, but they were small but with big visions, a global view, and they thought they could take over the world. There were actually a number of companies, but the most prominent companies during those times were Decode Genetics and Oz. We didn't have a lot of pixels during the 1990s. But Oz was a software company that developed communication software. I joined there in 1996 after a phone call from a rock star that thought I would be a great addition to the team. When I started, I think there were like 10 of us there. We grew to be 150 at the top of the company. I was there for 6 years. Those were, and this was the first entrepreneurial community that I experienced. This was a mixture of technical people and artists, and those were very exciting years. You experienced the whole range of emotions, desperation, excitement. It was always challenging. Decode was a very similar company. I don't know how many of you went to TEDx yesterday. Anybody? Yeah. The founder of Decode was the one with the closing remark, the guy that said there is no God. Decode was in many ways a very similar company. It was run by a strict dictator with a God complex. They really wanted your blood, and they had an army of lawyers. But otherwise, it was very similar to us. Us, however, fitted the criteria for described in the Boulder thesis quite well. It was led by very charismatic leaders that were very committed to their company. It was very inclusive. So once you were within the company, it was very non-hierarchical. So you could basically define your own role once you were there. And there was a lot of activities, all kinds of activities within the companies, with all kinds, I mean, both beer and pizza. Based on the energy that those two companies created, there was a gray investment market that formed. People wanted to participate in this energy that was surrounding those companies, and they started to trade stocks. Of course, there was no real information or flow around the companies, so the stock in Oz tended to fluctuate a bit with how many Ozers showed up at the local watering hole, kaffibarinn. So where are we? Yeah, so we have two high-profile or a couple of high-profile companies. They are working in industries that are very far from the pretty low-tech industry that had been the staple of Iceland up to then. And we had unregulated investments by the public. So fast forward to 2001. I don't really have to spell it out for you. To the global experience of the dot-com crash and a very Scandinavian Jante law, you should not think that you are better than us. Top it off with this stigma attached to failure in Europe. As one entrepreneur put it, if you succeed, you're a thief. If you fail, you're a moron. To this day, there are a lot of people that hate those two companies with a passion that is completely incomprehensible to me. However, even though these were tough times, both of those companies managed to continue, plow on in modified forms, and both of them actually managed exits in the hundreds of millions of dollars, Oz in 2008 and Decode in 2012. However, even though both of those companies were pretty amazing, they did not manage to succeed to kick up a real startup community in Iceland. Once people did no longer share the company Kool-Aid, the startup spirit kind of went away, and people went their separate ways. However, a lot of authors did move on to found their own companies, and I think they're involved in about 10 or 15 startup communities here today, and responsible for the employment of over 1,000 people. Most of those companies are predictably IT companies, but they also include an airline. Yeah, that's a strange one. So let's move forward to 2008. The Lehman Brothers collapsed and took down with them the whole Icelandic banking system in a domino effect during 1 week in 2008. These were tough times. Our prime minister even went on TV and said a lot of things, but the only thing anybody can remember is he said, "God bless Iceland." And unlike the pride that fills the hearts of Americans when their president says those words, we were like, oh, we're screwed. And we thought we were. But it turns out that when people are no longer spending their time shopping for towels in Italy, this is an actual case, or partying in a new city every weekend, they turn to their own society. So suddenly there are all kinds of activities popping out everywhere. And entrepreneurs were not just welcome, they were encouraged to come. So people had plenty of time on their hands, and they really wanted to do something new. They wanted to create a new society, and we really thought that by coming together and building a new society based on innovation, we could change the country, we could change the world, because we always have big dreams, right? So we got back a sense of community, and it turns out that the Boulder thesis does not only apply to tech communities, it actually, most of the principles apply to communities as a whole. And our community broke down during those early years of 2000, and it was really important to get that sense of community back, to basically get us all together, focus on something new. So one of those ingredients we thought were really, really important were new ideas, new companies, entrepreneurship. That would be the way forward. So we took a very Scandinavian decision, had the government put a lot of money into an investment fund to fund those startups. So this leads us to the present day. The startup community in Iceland is very much like what Brad Feld describes in his book as being the scenario in Boulder in 1995. There's a big divide between entrepreneurs and investors. There is limited trust and there is limited interest. I'm actually going to rephrase that. We tend to assume that just because people have money, they're investors. That is not necessarily true. Most people that have money in Iceland have made that money fishing or on the fishing industry. And how can we assume that people that made their money that way are interested in investing in something that is as far from their core values as IT or biotech? Why should they do that? So we have few angel investors here, and those that do tend to behave like the early investors in Boulder in 1995. They stick with the people they know, the people that have made them money earlier. So based on our stay in Portland, Oregon, it's interesting to compare those two environments and see maybe are there similarities? Is there something that we can learn from one another? In some ways, those two cities are very similar. They have very strong Scandinavian roots, but they're not Scandinavian. They're both relatively young. Both of them were pretty much villages in the early 20th century. And they are at heart one-industry towns. Most of the economy in both places have been based on one industry, which is utilization of natural resources. Here it's fish, and there it's timber. They're both creative, and they both really want to be cool. There's nothing they like better than having outsiders telling them how cool they are. Except that the startup scene in Portland is much more vibrant than it is here. So why is that? If we look at the Boulder thesis, we can see that we do have industry leaders here. Yes, we do have people that are really committed to the community. There's a lot of people that have been really active in the startup communities since the middle of the 90s. We do have. However, where we really fail is that we don't have a lot of continuous activities. We tend to show up at networking events when we want to get something. We don't really want to give. So that's kind of a problem that we need to address. And if we look at Portland. There's one thing that you notice. You notice a lot of trust between investors and entrepreneurs. You can see that both parties respect the other. And this was actually the first time I heard an investor says, I want to thank the entrepreneurs in the room for actually doing this. I was like, what? But it's necessary. You can't really be an investor if you don't have anything to invest in. We also have in Portland. We have a lot of technically minded investors. They're not big. It turns out that in the in the 80s, Intel created a research facility there, and now we have a lot of engineers running around with vested stock. They're not obscenely rich, but there's a lot of them, and they like to participate in the community, and they like to play around. So I think this is very interesting. I think it's a very important part of the community. Most people in Portland don't really agree with me. But I think it's quite an important aspect to have all those people with experience and a little bit of money participating. And the most obvious part is it's really easy to see what's going on in Portland. There's always something going on. There's a shared calendar that's just there, and you have all kinds of activities from hippie coders somewhere to Drupal groups, to meetups and all kinds of stuff. So you really get the feeling that the community is blossoming. There's even a male-only naked yoga group that keeps on posting to that calendar. I can only assume that it's a shared market. So on a more personal note, it's been quite interesting for me to move and establish myself in a new community. It turns out that it's you have all those tools that you think are working for you when you're in the community that you know, but when you go somewhere else, you basically have to start from all over again. And what I found out is, I suck at networking. I knew I wasn't really good at it because I'm introverted, like so many of you are here. But I'm really bad at it. But so are most of you. We as Icelanders suck at networking. And the reason for that is partly because we are such a small community and we don't migrate that much. So we tend to maintain ties with people we've known for a long time. So we don't really have a lot of tools of how to start a conversation and how to maintain one once it's started. So we tend to stick to the old standard. So who are your people? And if you're talking to somebody from abroad, how do you like Iceland? So this is something we really need to work on, because if you're an entrepreneur, this is your most important skill. This is your job, networking. And it really doesn't matter how smart you are or how innovative your idea is if nobody trusts you. So you have to build a chain of trust. You have to be able to get people to trust you in order to be able to share your ideas. And you can't expect anybody that you meet to be the person that's going to make it all come true. So you have to approach people without any second thoughts of, what is this relationship going to get me? But you have to be consistent. You have to be trustworthy, because if somebody really is interested in what you're doing, the person that's going to be the catapult of your life, what he's going to do, he's going to pick up the phone, he's going to call somebody in your network, and he's going to say, "Oh, that Helga person, what can you tell me about her?" So this is what you have to do. You have to network. And the thing you can do today is you can find somebody here somebody you didn't come with, and you can basically ask them what they're passionate about. Because everybody here is passionate about something. We are entrepreneur, right? So, and also we just picked people to come. So ask them, what's your passion? And listen. Listen to what they have to say, and remember it. Because that message, the passion of somebody else, that's your message for today. Thank you very much.